Welcome to the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin-Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we are visiting with a really interesting guest by the name of Karen Valencic. And what makes Karen so unique is that by trade and education, and I guess her original career, she was an engineer, and she also is a martial artist. And so, she left that world of engineering to develop a very unique company, consulting company called Spiral Impact. And I wanted to bring her onto the show just because of her ability in this company to come from an engineer's mindset that we and our audience, we can identify with, but also some things that we may not be aware of that are happening in our companies, in our organizations, even in our personal lives that we're just not aware of just because we're human beings. And so they're little small things that can really impact our bottom line, our retention, our ability to create a really powerful workplace culture that actually can help our business grow and be sustainable, whether it be, engineering, a manufacturer, a contractor, even a municipality. And so Karen has this principle, and we're going to get into this in a moment, and it's really about the science of influence. And so I'm going to let her explain that term, the science of influence, and what that really means in a real world work environment and to us in the industry for leadership and as leaders. So with that, Karen, the floor is yours.
Oh, wow. It's a big topic, and let me do it some justice. I think as when I was an engineer, and I guess I'm still an engineer, but I used to have ideas and I would try to share them. And oftentimes when we get excited and we get kind of we own this thing and we're so excited about it that we try to tell people, and we often hit brick walls because people don't listen to it. And the reason that is it's very simple, and it's physics. And my martial art really teaches me that in real time, because when you use statements, that is like a vector. That is like a vector. And
Right.
I always teach people that really the difference between influence and and control is really the difference between power and force. And think
Ooh.
about that. Force is a straight line function. It's like a hammer. I keep telling you this is the best way. I keep telling you that's a mistake, but people can't hear that. But if you shift that, power is rotational. And, if you think about motors, you think about tornadoes, hurricanes, power is rotational, and true power is something that we can all own for ourselves. But how that translates into our communication with influence is if we can learn to begin to ask questions rather than make statements. That is a great way to create influence. So the question, rather than saying, this, and I often use this term as I say, maybe I think blue is the greatest way, and the other person thinks green is. And
Right.
we can get into all this debate about the pros and the cons and all this stuff and get nowhere. But if one of us stops and says, tell me all about green. And then you listen and you hear what they've got to say, you acknowledge what they have to say, and you continue to ask them questions, then it sets you up in an environment in which then you're more likely to be heard because as they speak, you can actually ask them, well, what has happened when you do this? Or um, have you considered this? And so it creates a dialogue that's back and forth rather than I'm coming in as the expert. And I know in my own work, and I've been doing this for over 3 decades, that when I first started, I was really young. And I thought I knew a lot, of course I did, but I'm aware of now when I teach this stuff or when I teach my martial arts, I'm more apt to say, what would happen if you tried this? So that I can actually open
Mm,
people's minds to consider options that they may have not have thought of. And my own mind too, because I find a lot of
right.
times I can come in with my idea of how this should be done. But at this point in my life, I love asking people, how would you do this? And they always have something different than what I would have thought of that may be better, it may be not as good, or it may be some kind of combination. But having the confidence and the skill to be able to ask those questions and be present to be able to hear them and truly consider them is very powerful. And it really brings out great things in all of your people. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about water, I was thinking this morning, wastewater and water and I often say life is like a river, conflict is like a river. You know,
Mm.
it moves and it ebbs and it flows and it takes things with it and leaves some things behind and it always is going towards the lowest point, which is its intention. And communication can be that way as well. And if we put a dam there, we can get stagnant water if it's just sitting there for too long.
Oh, that's a great analogy because that leads me to something that we talked about, offline, when we were talking about having you come on the show, and that is
Yeah.
that most people consider conflict, oh, I've got to avoid that at all costs because they're very
Yes.
uncomfortable with it. It conflict, but you know what? Life is full of conflict. Conflict is inevitable. It's that what
Yes.
do you do with it in turning conflict from what we normally experience is destructive conflict
Right.
into productive conflict. And so one of the things that, you shared with me is that you want to help people master conflict. And so
Yes.
why do you feel it is important to master conflict? Because I guess that ties into what you were saying earlier. That's what is happening psychologically to someone in a situation when they're feeling steamrolled
Yes.
in
Yes.
a discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to answer that question with just kind of like a quick review of what I've noticed are people's preferences about conflict or their beliefs about conflict. And
Absolutely.
there- and there's five of them. One belief is that we need to resolve it or manage
Hmm,
it. And I'm not saying those are
interesting.
bad, but
Right.
there's to be an intent. We got to get rid of it because it's bad. And so there's
Yes.
that thought behind it. The second one is that I want to avoid it at all costs.
Hmm.
And that is what all of our sitcoms are made of, are people avoiding conflict. And it's prevalent everywhere. So
Right.
because people don't know what to do with it. The third one, there are people that love to create conflict. And there's not a lot of them, but there
Oh,
are.
yeah.
There are people that just love to throw bombs and see what happens. And that is a certain type of personality that exists. And then there are also people that believe they have no conflict. And I have met some leaders that are a bit like this. And perhaps they don't have conflict, but if you're in a leadership role, you really need to be cognizant of what's going on around you because conflict is a natural. And
Right.
if you are, in your industry of wastewater, if you don't have conflict, you're not on a leading edge because in order to innovate, you have to have conflict. Otherwise, if there's no conflict, everything's fine and hunky-dory. And so
Right.
conflict makes us discover, and you can think about the COVID-19 situation and how many innovations have come out of that. And
Mm,
you commonly using these virtual platforms is one of them.
right.
Plus, it's just a myriad of other things. But when I talk, the fifth thing is master conflict. And what do I mean by that? Master conflict means I understand what conflict is. And I have the tools to be able to shift it to be productive and innovative rather than
Mm,
destructive. Because
mhm.
that is all, those are all tools that always work. And so, one of my, I practice Aikido, which is my martial art. And one of our early American studiers, George Leonard, he had a book called Mastery. And in there, he says, the true master isn't about being perfect, but the true master tries and fails again and again. And that's how I look at it.
Mm,
It's I don't always get it right, but I know what to do when I fail. And I get up and I re-engage and I know how to do that. So mastery is really recognizing that it's natural,
right.
it's essential, and it's going to happen. And if it's not happening, it's happening somewhere. And I think a lot of times it's buried, so we don't know it's there. And people in leadership roles, if you can create an environment in which people are really comfortable sharing maybe a not a popular opinion or viewpoint, that's what creates great innovations, is when you get that quiet person that doesn't say much, that you create that environment in which they will. And we can consider everything. And it's really fun. It's really fun to watch groups of people realize what conflict is and create an environment in which they can share. It's very, I have a newsletter I call Ah Yes, and it's those moments of yes, we can come together
Right.
and really hear each other and it's fascinating. It's fun and it's fascinating and it's very liberating for people.
I
So,
love that because it's putting the mindset shift around conflict, that it
yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean something bad. It doesn't always mean that we are at odds with each other. It just means we have ideas that we need to exchange, and my idea might be different than yours, but
yeah,
together, maybe when we collaborate and think about it, we're going to come up with something incredible for an
right,
organization. So I wanted to,
right.
you talked about simply telling someone what to do can actually make them feel like they're being attacked, and explain that
Yes.
little bit about that psychology, and why is that, and as well as there's a definite maybe explain there's a definite difference between giving someone direction,
Hmm.
or and creating inadvertently, or just not knowing that just by the way
Uh-huh.
you're presenting something to them, you're actually creating unwanted resistance.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I just I wrote an article recently that's called It's Not Them. No. It,
Oh, okay.
it's not them, because I think a lot of times I think a lot of it depends on roles and it depends on
Yeah.
environment. So
Yes.
certainly, I've done a lot of work in hospitals, and there are certain things that have got to be done a certain way, no doubt about it. And you've got to just acknowledge that. But a lot of times it's the way we communicate that. And of course, if somebody's in an environment in which something has to be done a certain way, there needs to be a training around informing them on how to do that. But the fact is if someone just says, a better way to do that is, or I think you should do this, that tends to put up a barrier because
Yes.
it's an opinion. And
Mm,
and I think what people hear is, don't you think I know that? Do you think I'm stupid? I think that
mm.
there's some ego stuff that goes on in there. And I
The
and
internal
that
dialogue within them that you don't hear.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And it's kind of like well, someone asked me once of, Karen, this is all great when you're dealing with adults, but what about your toddler that you're trying to get out the door on time? And you keep saying, put on your shoes, put on your shoes, put on your shoes.
Right.
And, and they don't. They don't. And I liken that to, it's the thing where we keep telling somebody something and they don't do it. And it's a hammer and it's
Right.
exhausting. But if you
Hmm.
stop and you engage with the person, which is, hey, I know that you're involved in this right now. And how, will you be ready in 5 minutes? I mean, it's a different thing because you're acknowledging that they've got their own thing going on, but you're then, asking the question, will you be, can you be ready in 5 minutes? And and you think about it, it's so stupid in some ways. Why don't we just do it? But the fact is when people feel ordered, they shut down.
You
They
made a
don't
term
listen.
about that is that, it's almost like you're asking permission when you frame it like that. Do you think you might be able to be ready in 5 minutes? That's
Right.
asking permission. And that,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just that tiny, tiny shift
Yeah.
that, you were saying that when you come out in order or hitting someone like over the head with a hammer, is
Yeah.
that creates that internal conflict. And it would, and I could see that now. We don't realize it, but if you think about it, we don't, when we do it to others, we forget that we really don't like it when people do it to us. And
No,
there's
they don't.
sometimes, I have to laugh because I'm a bit older than my husband, not by a lot, but a bit. And I was helping my mother with chores when I was like 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm 8 years older than my husband. And so he will try to micromanage me in like a simple kitchen chore, like wiping the counter down. And he
Yeah.
tries to instruct me, and I'll turn to him and I'll say, "Dear, I was doing this before you were a twinkle in your father's eye." It's like, please don't micromanage me, because you know what? Then when I do it to him, he gives me flack. And last night
Yeah.
we were talking about it, and I said, you know what? This is a character defect. This is something we both have a bad habit of doing. And I think we need to be more mindful and stop ourselves when
Yeah.
we're finding that we're telling someone, I think you should do that, or don't do it this way, because we
Yeah.
think our way is right.
Right. Right. And we want it done that way. Well, I have a prop that I made and it's a headband and I have a door on it and the door goes across the forehead to the
Okay.
mind. It's something to think about is how do you open that door, particularly if it's got a regular, handle on it. It's not a push door, it's a regular door. You've got to turn that door. And so the telling
Ooh,
somebody is pushing it. But to really open that door, you got to rotate it, which brings me back to the spiral. And that's the
right.
part of that piece of the spiral that really, really works. So it's and my article that I wrote about It's Not Them was really I had a colleague of mine that gave me some unsolicited advice, and I was aware I could feel myself closing down.
Ooh,
I thought, that's what we typically do. But for me, it's like I know this stuff and I'd like to be at a point. It's not about him. It's about my reaction to it too. I mean, if I want to
mm,
go to another
yes.
level of not having conflict, it's like I know he has my best interests at heart. And it just again that those are, personal development is like a spiral and you just kind of keep going. Oh, you kind of keep moving and you're at a different point and you see things differently. And I am aware I'm at a point where I should be able to have somebody tell me something and recognize it's they're not saying I don't know. They're not they're and also to reflect on myself. Am I setting myself up for unsolicited advice? Am I being too transparent with what's going
Ooh,
on? That's another part of it. So it's really fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
in closing, because I want to, set this up for our next episode about,
Uh-huh.
maybe some of the things that leaders need to be aware of that they don't understand, or reasons that employees leave and what they
Yeah.
miss, is that how how can leaders recognize within their team that someone has begun to disengage
Yeah.
emotionally, because that's the start of them wanting to look for greener pastures, that there's beginning to disengage, even though they're still doing the job, they're
Yeah.
shut down. What are some of the warning signs?
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that requires a very astute leader to or manager or whatever your role is to be able to see that. And I think that's you've really got to understand your people. And you've also really got to be having real conversations with them. A lot
Mm,
of times we have these brief check-ins, but I suggest to leaders that they really do more than a casual check-in, but they actually know what their employees' dreams are, what their aspirations are, what
mm,
what and create a presence with yourself that
I like that.
invites that comfortableness to be psychologically visible to each other. And that requires a bit of time and effort on a leader's part. And so if you know your employees and can make regular time to really review those things, ask them for their input, and really be present without an agenda around it so that they can be heard. I think that you'll be able to see that. I also do when I work with teams, I really like everything DISC. It's a very thorough personality assessment. And I used to hate doing personality assessments because I don't like to put people in categories, but I find that the one I use it's just so specific and helpful for not just everybody, but for myself as well. And it gives you a framework to understand that, as a leader, I may have a certain type of personality that really conflicts with another person that works for me. And I remember working with a group years ago, and it was actually a small dental practice. And everybody in that practice, they were very much people, and they were very people and dominant people. And they all
Mm,
engaged in a very high energy form. And at one point, the dentist decided he was going to let the staff hire a new person. And they picked a person that was an introvert, that liked details. It was the opposite of all of them. And he
interesting.
initially, oh my God, what did they do? But the staff knew what they needed. And so really
They were
understanding
looking
that
for balance, as a
they were,
fellow everything, because I'm an everything disc facilitator as well. And I
yeah,
find that, when people use these, is don't look for people that are exactly like you. And you should never,
right.
because I think it's actually illegal to do this, you should never be using these profile assessments for hiring decisions. I don't think you're allowed to.
No,
But you don't want to look for people that are the same as you, because when they're
right.
not, they bring different strengths and weaknesses to the team. And it's
Yes,
storing up those spots where you might be missing something, that someone can bring a lot of insight. When we talk
right,
about that detailed person, that
right.
influencer is all over, because I'm a high I, and an influencer
Yeah,
is all over the place, and they may not be detail oriented, and they need someone to work with that is detail oriented, that can rope them in and help them to focus when they need
right.
to focus on things. And so, yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's a very, very good point of
yeah,
knowing your team and
yeah,
how you can communicate best with them, and how for them to learn who you are as a leader, to when
right.
they need to communicate with you, what they need to do to prepare in order for you to have a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't know if you've ever used the productive conflict of
Oh,
everything
yes.
to, that
Oh,
is a
yes.
fantastic tool. As a matter of fact, when it first came out, I thought, well, they don't need me anymore. No,
Oh
because I thought
no,
it was
that
that
those
good.
profiles on top of the workplace are extremely powerful. And I think
Yeah.
even and if you're leading with a sales, if you're working with a primarily sales organization to do the workplace culture and then also the sales module, because that
Uh-huh.
actually helps people read people outside of their organization very, very
Yeah.
quickly. So,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
tell leaders and organizations there are so many tools out there and consultants
Yeah.
like yourself, consultants like
Yeah.
myself, that can really help you get into the human side of this. And
Yeah.
so if somebody listening, wants to become more influential, as we talk about that science of influence, not
Yeah.
louder, here we go, not louder, like
Right.
you will listen to me. I'm just going to keep getting louder until you
Right.
acquiesce. It's like, how can they
Right.
start and how can they get in touch with you and learn more about how you work with teams?
Well, for one, I suggest if people want to learn more about what I have to offer and to connect with me, my website, I keep it up to date, and I put in ways, I put in ways things I've got going on that you can connect with, and also just a way you can schedule an appointment with me. And that website you can access two ways. One is KarenValencic.com, which I recognize is hard to spell. So it also Spiral Impact, which is spiralandimpact.com, takes you to the same place. So, and I have a lot on the internet. I'm on LinkedIn. I write on Substack rather than on a blog at this point. And I also have YouTube videos out there. And I also have a book. This is the Black Belt edition of Spiral Impact. So those are different ways to connect.
Well,
Yeah.
Karen, thank you so much because you and I are both being disc people and just into a lot of. And I'm not a martial artist, but one of my favorite books for management is The Five Rings, which is
Oh,
based
yes.
on
Yeah.
Japanese martial arts. So there was
Hmm.
just this synergy between us, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation with
Yes.
next in our series, which is going to be all about why good employees leave and what leaders are missing to
Yes.
stop it and what they can do to correct it. And
Yeah.
so, again, thank you for coming on and having these very important conversations
Yeah.
with me and for our industry. And thank you, listeners, for spending time with us. And I hope you got something out of this and at least are giving you some thoughts to go, maybe I need to look at things a little different. And so,
Uh-huh.
until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.